just I'll start off with a little bit about my practice, and in quite a lovely way. Like I've worked with Natasha before as well, and our work just seemed to chime really well for this exhibition. So it was a really exciting one to paint and work on and have chats about. So in terms of my own practice, I look at memory and sort of self-perception and sort of accessing that through film and paint. So for this show, I kind of went on a sort of exploration of what I've been painting. I kind of wanted to articulate even further, drill down into what I was painting and why I was painting it, and sort of questioning the work a bit. I've been making these paintings with the black bars that you often see on films for widescreen shots for a while. And it was only through the process of doing this show, actually, that they kind of took on their own identity as this void space that it sort of grouped the work together, as well as almost separating these figures. So I kind of went into that dynamic and that headspace when I started approaching the work. So I'll start off as you come into the show and then work my way around and So we've got this one, my last two molecules of serotonin. The film I based this work on, I've been watching some really naff movies over lockdown, and just been ticking away with my phone as I've been watching them. They're all very odd kind of foreign films or really obscure B movies with a really low budget, but interestingly enough, the really low quality of the camera through age or whatever seem to present these really great sort of compositions and weird colors and things. I was like a magpie to them, basically. And I just went with compositions that really drew me in. This work, a little bit self-reflective, maybe. But I just wanted to paint some figures in a landscape, really. That was the basis for this one, and get a little giggle out of the title as well. Just to give a little context to the shape and the sizes there. This piece was kind of the first one that I had in my head when Jonathan approached me about the show. I've been playing a lot with scale within my practice, and I had this vision for a really large painting with not a lot on it. And I've been working on these 5x7s, just happenstance really, and I thought, well, what would happen if I worked at 5x7 but on a massive surface, and really expanded this void space that seemed to be appearing within the work. And I think it went well, and I kind of wanted this one to explore medium as well and sort of bring us back to painting. I was getting a bit in my head in terms of the content of the paintings. So I kind of wanted to break from that, and this one I actually managed to preserve the wood coming through on the image, which I was quite pleased with, actually. So I'll just move on to the next one. Again, just playing with space and paint. I had a lot of fun in this exhibition making the work. I just wanted to explore what I could achieve in terms of medium, and that relationship with paint, but also with space and playing with the figure and this sort of void space again, seeing how much I could include it within the work or how little. It did seem to migrate towards the eye area on the figures, which became a sort of running theme within the work. The women that I'm painting, they are sort of reflective of myself, but also I want to keep them quite open to interpretation. And it kind of felt like a natural decision to remove the eyes, almost like a mask, to anonymize them, not only from their source material, but to open them up almost when viewing. She didn't end up with one, actually, but it was just, again, playing with this black void space and seeing how that worked in relation to the figure. Really got into the medium on this one. It's kind of an interesting painting, this one, actually. it was about looking at the self, and I wanted to paint a painting about how I was looking at the self and how I was looking at, memory. So I've actually got two figures in this one. She's only a hand by the chair, but I just wanted to change up the dynamic and look at separation of space as well. So I had quite a lot of fun with this, and I began using this black paint. It's the world's blackest black, and it absorbs light. And it just seemed to elevate this void space that all these figures seem to be inhabiting, and almost gave this sort of feeling of, I don't know, there's like an isolation to it. It just seemed, because of the contrast, it just really worked well with what I was playing with in terms of ideas. Really went to town on that one with some rags and white spirit. It's quite fun. With a lot of the work, I try and keep the titles quite funny, just to sort of take the seriousness out of them, really. And yeah, so can I help you? I'm just sort of harking back to some days I've worked on a reception desk. After watching some of these films, I do see these figures, and they're quite, they do remind me of like previous jobs and things and experiences. I also paint as well from films that I've sort of grown up with. So this was actually inspired by Overboard with Goldie Hawn. And she's absolutely shattered after doing all the housework in the film. She's been cleaning this house from top to toe. And I just felt like painting it, to be honest. Again, playing with this void space and negative space, and just enjoying the paint, really. I quite enjoyed that one. And Wipeout was just a little fun title. I felt quite apt for the work. I got into isolating the face as well and bringing up the resolution. I kind of wanted to play with how much I was going towards the source material, but also keeping that painterly quality as well. So it was kind of just a lot of play for this exhibition, which was really lovely to have the opportunity to do. Now this one, it was based on a film, The Wasp Woman, and it was filmed in the 50s, and it was a sort of stereotypical horror B movie with a really low budget, and it was absolutely fantastic. I'd highly recommend watching it. The figure in this one, she was just again, a lot of these figures, they're kind of sorry if I'm just sort of rambling a little bit. They seem quite melancholic, I've noticed, and on seeing the show up, a lot of them seem quite meditative. So I think, as I'm thinking about these memories, these experiences, I think the figures are as well. So they've kind of become me, or a cipher for me, I suppose, or for the viewer in any case. This work was quite interesting in that it was the only one I'd done in my sort of stereotypical style of having the calico, the plain canvas coming through on it. So again, there's another little play with my like mediums and dynamics and things with that. So I quite enjoyed that. But I wanted to sort of focus on the board works for this exhibition and sort of expand my horizons a little in terms of surface. But I did make a lot of the ones on board, these little ones. It was nice working at that scale, though, in comparison to, say, the larger one. There's quite an intimate sort of relationship with the surface. It's a very insular, your body sort of cradled over the surface. It's quite a physical sort of experience when you're painting and putting so much detail into things. These tended to have higher resolution. So there was a sort of, I don't know, like a more intense connection to what I was painting, I felt, perhaps, in some of these smaller ones. And there's a lot to get in on a small surface as well, which kind of pushes that, I suppose, that feeling. I do also take inspiration from other artworks I've seen, or ones that I've sort of grown up with, the sort of prints in the house and things like that. So after Fragonard, the woman on the swing, I'd seen her sort of represented. It must have been a reference in one of these strange B movies. And I just felt like compelled to paint her. It was just too nice a source image to pass up on, really. Again, playing with this void space on the eyes, quite minimal on this one compared to others such as this. A lot of the work became about headspace. So although the source imagery was quite fun for this one, it was My Cousin Vinny, the film. They kind of, yeah, they all have this sort of melancholic feeling to them, really. They're kind of insular in a way. Again, my head is a jungle. I really enjoyed painting this one. I think it's my favorite from the whole show, to be honest. It encapsulated everything I was trying to go for, really, in terms of space, in terms of division of space and how the paint behaves on the surface. I kind of had this world that I was exploring of world of my own that I was creating of paint that's just sort of, I just had this sort of feeling it's like flying between the canvases or slipping away, and they could just sort of move from surface to surface, and the clean lines I achieved on this one really sort of just nailed it for me personally. Yeah, so really enjoyed that one. I did take a slight detour into just space itself. I painted this again from another B movie. I think it was a horror film about someone trapped in a house, but they had fantastic decor. So I thought, yeah, I'm going to paint that orange room. It was just too beautiful to try and get out of my head, essentially. So I put it on my canvas, and I was playing with this sort of series. I sort of located the work because it was going off on a limb, really, and I wasn't really sure where it was going. So I stuck with candelabras as a kind of location or a locating feature. I ended up going from the 60s B movie into Blade Runner, which has been a constant source for me in my practice. Really sort of went from quite a minimal, just play. This is more of a play painting for me. I didn't really expect it to end up in my selection for the exhibition, but it just read well with these other ones that I created. Yeah, I really enjoyed just painting it without the figure and just seeing what that would do. Again, it's sort of a headspace, but it's not located to anybody. And these sort of floating items seem to be prevalent within my work. They kind of come forward almost. I did dip back into figures though, playing with different palettes and things. Kind of seeing how far I could go with color, really, because I do find myself, I find a sort of palette and I stick to it for a while. I just need to change it up every now and then. Yeah, so I went as neon as I could go, really, with this delicious black paint. Telephones are another thing that kind of have started to jump out at me in terms of my painting language, I suppose. They're these ciphers that keep reappearing. So I think they're an avenue I'm going to keep exploring. I think they're kind of symbolic for me in terms of connection to this space, this world, this sort of there's so many connotations with phones and sort of wires and cords and things that I think there's a lot more there to dig into. They often, well, this one was quite quite a funny title, professionalism versus the internal void of despair. She's not having a great day at work there, but I quite like the idea of people on phones and they look interrupted. It's kind of like these paintings, they're interruptions almost for these figures because they're inhabiting this space and they're almost moving around for me. So yeah, another phone here. Catching feelings with a slightly apocalyptic background. Really enjoyed this one. Just give a sense of scale there. And again, we got the telephone in that one as well. So yeah, I think that's probably where the work's going to dive off after this. But yeah, I just really enjoyed painting this show. And I think that's pretty much all my work from the exhibition. So on that note, I think I'll leave it there.
Yeah, so I would also like to start just by thanking Elysium and Jonathan for thinking of me. And yeah, thanking you guys for coming, and a big thank you to the Arts Council Wales for their support as well. Um, so yeah, my kind of practice started developing when I was at uni. I guess as most people's, I did my BA at Cardiff Met. I did a fine art BA. And it was around 2017, 2018 that I started experimenting with digital work. I started off my degree as a painter. I was doing a lot of painting, a lot of drawing. But once I'd started to experiment with digital work, I was kind of just sold, really. For a couple of reasons. I loved the ability that I could just drill down into the fine details of a piece and really refine it. It's something that's I've always really enjoyed about making a piece of work, is that kind of that craft of it, perfecting those fine details. And it's something that digital is just so good for. Um, so yeah, also the flexibility of it. Once you've got a digital piece, you can then translate it into kind of many other things, as I've done in this show. And also like the portability of it. I think when I graduated, I was living in just a really tiny studio flat, didn't have space for lots of materials. So yeah, using my iPad, using my laptop, it was just a lifesaver, really, to be able to continue to make creative work. Um, so this is kind of a little bit of my uh, digital process going on the screen here. So all my work kind of starts off its life in this dimension almost, as a pencil sketch. I kind of refine that and then scan that into my iPad, work it up into a digital piece. And then after that, I kind of move it somewhere else. And for this exhibition, that has been into textiles. So I've produced a lot of one of a kind fine art textiles based off of my digital work that I've produced for this show. Um, the reason for the textiles is my final major project um, at uni was the first time I did this. So this, I really wanted to include this piece because it was like the pièce de résistance of my degree show, which is where Jonathan remembered me from. So it was kind of like a nice call back to that. And yeah, this is when I first kind of started experimenting with turning digital pieces into textiles. And I was doing a lot of research for my dissertation at the time on um, like female craftsmanship and how women have told stories through creative mediums, and how the mediums they chose were often maligned or maybe not thought of as like fine art per se. Um, and yeah, obviously textiles is a very traditionally feminine medium. And so I was doing lots of reading about historic textiles artists. And then at the same time, getting into digital art, I was doing a lot of scrolling through Instagram and seeing what contemporary female artists and illustrators were doing with digital illustration as well. And it kind of felt like the same vibe, where it was maybe not quite considered as important as like a painting or sculpture or something. And I thought I just saw a parallel between these two art forms that female creatives were using to tell stories. And I thought, what if you just kind of mush them together? Um, So yeah, that's how my degree show came about. And I had three pieces very similar to this, but yeah, it was very important to me to include a little callback there to this piece from 2019. And it was a great jumping off point then for the rest of the show. Um, yeah, so this was the next piece in the show. So this is called Astrophile. And as I kind of knew that these pieces were going to be made into textiles, it pushed me to think a bit more of how I wanted them to hang, how I wanted them to be. And I knew I really wanted to do something long. So this is like the longest piece that I have in the show. I wanted that draping, I wanted that hang. It's a tactile medium. So yeah, I wanted to do this big long figure, and I kind of get my inspiration from all over, to be honest. Um, I think this was kind of around Halloween time. So I had like lots of spirituality, mysticism, witchcraft on the brain, and wanted to produce something that really showcased that. Yeah, this was a nice figure to draw as well. I think having started with more traditional mediums, drawing, painting, I wanted to do something with a bit of like foreshortening of the leg and create that sense of perspective. So it's a really interesting pose for that. Yeah, this is the next one. So this is the captain's wife. For this one, the main thing that I wanted to do with this is it was an experimentation in pattern clashing, and I wanted to do some just outrageous prints and patterns and have this like almost classical nude figure cutting through that just busyness and chaos of the wallpaper, the plants, the beads on the lamp, the texture of the sofa. Yeah, and the name kind of came at the end from the ship in the background. But yeah, I find that a lot of my pieces develop really organically. I don't necessarily know 100% what they're going to look like when I start them. When I'm sketching them out, I might do like a rough sense of a background, but most of the time I'm just kind of focusing on what I want the figure to look like. And then I build this world around them. And a lot of that world is informed by like what I'm kind of imagining in my own mind as I'm drawing them. And I develop little stories for them and then kind of suit the piece to fit that narrative. It's very much like a world of my own creation. Um, yeah, and then this is Ceridwen's Cauldron. So a lot of my work is inspired by like you'll see a running theme of like mythology, legends, and I'd been doing a lot of like Greek mythology, and I was working on my piece Persephone at the same time, and I thought, why not delve into a bit of Welsh mythology? Ceridwen's cauldron of poetic inspiration, and what's more inspiring than a cauldron of inspiration. So yeah, this was one of my favorite pieces from the show. It took hours and hours, days, to create and to refine all the details, the vase in the background, and yeah, I just really wanted to build a world behind her. The kind of bead top was inspired by the witch from the film Death Becomes Her, and that kind of like beaded top that she wears in that. Yeah. This one was one of the most exciting ones to work on. So my intention for this was that it was going to be a woven tapestry. It's not something that I've ever tried to do before. So yeah, it was definitely there was a bit of a learning curve to it. So it's digitally woven, not hand woven. And I had to design the digital file in a very specific way. So I thought I'd include the original digital file because there was quite a contrast between the two. I kind of had a pack sent where it was like, if you want the tapestry to have this color, this is the color that you'll need to send, sort of thing. So I had to kind of create this color palette that I wanted and then kind of work out what colors I needed to then draw with for that to translate correctly into the tapestry. So you've got these very like neon greens and pinks in the original digital file that you don't have in the final tapestry. So it's a big difference between the two. But yeah, it was a really interesting one to work on. And yeah, this is based off of the legend of Persephone, which was the daughter of the Greek goddess Demeter, who's the goddess of the harvest. And she is the wife of Hades, the god of the underworld. And this story to explain the changing of the seasons, where Hades tricks her into eating a certain number of pomegranate seeds. So she's then trapped in the underworld. And then her mother, Demeter, heartbroken for her loss, destroys the harvest for the months that she's trapped in the underworld. So that explains winter and spring and the changing of the seasons. Yeah. There's some details here as well of the weave. Yeah, it was a really exciting piece. Definitely something that I'll be doing again. So this is Honeymoon. This is inspired by the photography of Juno Calypso. So she shoots some amazing, very like eerie almost photographs in old American style motels. And she did this series with this gorgeous heart-shaped bathtub. And yeah, I kind of just had this image of like this woman who was on a honeymoon and killed her husband and then took a bath. So yeah, that's this kind of story that I'm illustrating here. And there's lots of like kinds of fun little images. It was nice to see on the opening night as well, like people being entertained by like the vibrator and the magazine and the gun and all these like little details. Yeah, it's not a piece that takes itself too seriously. And this is Mothership. I've included a sketch there as well on some of my slides, some of my original sketches. I didn't have them for every single piece, but I thought where I could, I would include them. So that was where I started. So I had this figure and I knew I wanted her to be suspended in out of space. And I think originally I was thinking like some kind of space goddess, but then like as the piece progressed, it kind of became this NASA astronaut that had been blasted out of a spaceship with no helmet on, and then she's about to die and then had been beamed up by a UFO. There's the little narrative in my head as I was illustrating this. So yeah, she's also a Welsh astronaut. So if you like look closely, just the other side of a NASA badge, you have a little tiny Welsh flag as well. And then this is Siren. And again, the original pencil sketch for that there as well. Yeah, I wanted to draw a mermaid initially. So I was thinking like a big, long kind of fishtail, but then this kind of image of this woman in this rock pool came to me, and we'd not long been to Tenerife and been to the rock pools at Garachico, and it was the most gorgeous scene in the background, which kind of inspired that whole shape. And yeah, this is another favorite of mine. This is Redcar. So this is inspired by my hometown of Redcar. So this is Redcar Seafront. And yeah, in the background there you have the steelworks. And I finished this piece the day the blast furnace was demolished in the background there. So it was probably like the last it was like out of date as soon as it was finished, in terms of the skyline. But yeah, I just have very fond memories of being on like Redcar Beach, Redcar Seafront, having a lemon top ice cream. So it was very, very personal piece that I wanted to include. Yeah. And then yeah, this is another one. So I displayed these two as well, Redcar and this piece as well, differently to the others. So these are printed on silk, then mounted on canvas and then framed. So just kind of experimenting with a digital way of a different way of displaying them, but also like they were very, there's a different style to them. I tend to just use block color and line work, but in these two, I was experimenting more with creating like shading, depth, which I hadn't really done previously in digital pieces. So it was a bit of a expansion on that. Yeah, so this is Guinevere, which is King Arthur's wife. So it's another kind of legend-inspired piece. And when I was kind of sketching out the initial piece for this, I had in my mind like a Joan of Arc type of figure, like just a fierce female warrior, just stood there in the fire. So yeah, I really wanted to create something like a powerful, strong, feminine image. And yeah, I think that's my last piece. I think that's me done.